You're watching the #1 podcast in the YouTube wrestling community, and I am your host, Jean-Paul Leek, and this is Rope Break. And guys, of course, this is also Tuesday morning, so you know what that means, Monday Night Raw review. And this Raw, I will say, it was better than last week, the go-home show for Clash of Champions Gold Rush. Check out the review on the channel if you haven't already. But, you know, this is now the Fallout show, and this was a little better. And don't get me wrong, when you're saying it's a little better than last week's, that's not saying much. Was this a good show? I wouldn't go that far, but it was definitely better than last week. And with the draft coming up in a little over a week, you know, that is also exciting stuff as well. So, guys, you know, let's get right into the review. Raw opened up, of course. You know, we had to get, you know, the champion, Drew McIntyre and stuff which was a pretty good match with Randy Orton, the ambulance match. Like I said, to start off a little slow. You had the inclusion of all the legends. And, you know, it was a good match, though, I will say. But, you know, that's how we started the show. So all the legends are in the ring. You know, they're with Drew. Or I guess they're in the ring first. And then Shawn Michaels introduces Drew. He comes down. And pretty much Drew's just saying how, like, oh, you know, they helped him. They all got revenge on Randy Orton. And he kind of goes through everybody. Like, Christian was a guy who stuck up for him, you know, really helped him out when he first started. And he's like, oh, Big Show. And then he starts laughing. He's like, you know, hey, I'm going to put you over. Don't worry. I'm not going to say anything bad. But he says how Big Show was always there for him, you know, helped him out and this and that. And, you know, Big Show, you didn't hear what he said, but Drew was trying, you know, he laughing his ass off up there. And they always say Big Show's a funny guy, so I believe it. And then when he goes to Shawn, he's like, oh, you know, you mentored me in NXT. And then, you know, thanks him for that. And then, of course, Ric Flair, he's like, when I first signed to the roster, and you were an active competitor. And he's like, I can't believe it. You know, I'm on the same roster as Ric freaking Flair. So, you know, of course, he puts all the guys over and everything. And he's like, you know, now Randy Orton, we're done with this feud. You know, we can put this behind us. But he's like, you know, I'm sure he's just going to cry and complain and ask for another title shot anyway. And then we see Randy Orton pop up on the screen. And Randy's like, hey, listen, I don't need to cry. I don't need to beg for another title opportunity. Do you know who I am? I'm Randy Orton. I'm the 13-time WWE champion. I'm the legend killer. And I'm going to show you, all of you, what happens when you cross me. So they're kind of just like, oh, okay, you know, whatever. Like, and, you know, just like, you know, screw this guy. So then after that, we get Drew McIntyre saying all this talk about titles and everything. He's like, you know, people asking for title opportunities is giving me an idea. He's like, I'm going to put my title on the line tonight in an open challenge, but it has to be no one who has faced me before for the WWE Championship. So that kind of, you know, made things a little interesting. You thought, who was it going to be? You know, it probably wasn't going to be a title change, but you're hoping for a return or a call up or a debut or something. And we did just get that. So, you know, then they go next set, which this was a good opening segment, you know, like, you know, this match that they're setting up, it's not going to be, there wasn't going to be a title switch. That's obvious. It don't matter who would have debuted or like came back or returned or anything. It wasn't going to be a title switch. But, you know, you do this, it causes some excitement. And also with Randy Orton saying that, well, I'll show you what happens when you cross the legend killer. Obviously, it's like, okay, this feud's going to continue and it's going to lead into Hell in a Cell. Because obviously, like we were saying in the Clash of Champions review, how do you build up Randy Orton so much to just have him lose and then not become WWE champion? So clearly this feud's going to continue into Hell in a Cell, where he should, hopefully, no offense to Drew, but win the WWE championship. So then we get a recap of Asuka and Zelina Vega, you know, their match that they had a Clash of Champions, which, you know, we said on the channel wasn't a bad match. It was short, sweet, to the point, did what it needed to do. But then we're getting a rematch tonight. And, you know, the rematch, it's like, I don't know how I feel about that just right away, especially with the match we got in the exact same outcome. But before that, Kayla Braxton was interviewing Zelina, and she's like, oh, you came up a little short. And Zelina's like, really? So I don't know if that was trying to be like a short joke or just, you know, whatever. But she's like, oh, you know, who are you to say this, blah, blah, blah. And she starts yelling at her. Then Asuka shows up. And then Asuka, you know, in the English that, you know, she can speak like, oh, you're not ready for me, blah, blah, blah. And then they start, you know, then Zelina starts yelling at her in Spanish. Asuka starts yelling in Japanese. That I liked. I'd rather just have them do that because it sounds more believable. I mean, Zelina speaks fine English, but with Asuka, you know, I just like her speaking in Japanese more often. Even if I don't understand what she's saying, at least it has that emotion. So then, of course, we get this match. And, I mean, this match, it was pretty much the same thing at the pay-per-view. Oh, they also were like, oh, yeah, the King's Court, blah, blah, blah. That's going to be up, the Mysterio family. It was almost like the King's Maury Povich court, but, we'll get to that when we get there. So then this match, like I said, pretty much the same thing. Zelina was working over the arm. They're like, is it done? But then, Asuka fought back, and by the time she, got the chicken wing in, it was pretty much over. But there was one spot that I liked towards the end of this thing when Zelina, she hit a backstabber, and then she covered Asuka, and then she actually grabbed Asuka's arm and pulled it away from the ropes. Like, you're not grabbing the ropes, because earlier in the match, Zelina, she got her foot on the ropes and got a rope break. So then Asuka then put her leg on the rope and was like, well, hey, I'm a little taller than you, so I can actually use my leg and stuff to reach. But, like I said, Asuka lock and done. But it was a good match in the same thing. It was short, it was sweet, it didn't take forever. It got the point across, but then we see backstage, and then the four legends, now they're playing poker, they're like, it's legit and everything. So they're having a good time. And then we go back then from commercial, because after that we went to the commercial. So then when we come back, Andrade's just in the ring, and he's just yelling at Zelina, just berating her. He's like, look, you said that we were the ones who are bullshit. Look at you, you're nothing without me. He's like, an Angel, he's shit too. You guys were just holding me down. Now I'm going to be on my own. He's like, look at you. You said that you were better. You had 2 title opportunities against Asuka. Where did that get you? Done. You couldn't beat her. He's like, I'm the best wrestler in WWE. I'm the most legit. So he pretty much has like an open challenge. He's like, who wants to come out and face me? And then we hear, oh, bask in its glory. So Keith Lee comes out. And, I mean, this was a good promo by Andrade. Even if you could barely understand him, it was a good promo, because I do think he's legit. If you see everything he did in NXT, there's no way that you're like, this guy isn't going to be a star. Unfortunately, like everyone else from NXT, or 95% of the people called up and immediately get turned into bullshit. So it was a good promo. But then when Keith Lee comes out, you're like, well, okay. Who are you going to root for here, Andrade or Keith Lee? I mean, I'm sure there's some people who wanted to see Andrade win, but it's even if you wanted to see him win, you knew he wasn't going to, and you knew this was just, he's going to act all tough and, get his ass kicked, which is pretty much what happened. I mean, it was good. It was hard hitting. Like I was saying to Juan, Andrade, I really like him just because of everything he hits is stiff. It's believable. He's not, punching, and stopping 5 inches away from a guy's face. He's literally like connecting, bone to bone when he hits a guy. So that's really good. But this thing, it ended pretty much how you thought it was. Andrade went for the double knees into corner. He hits it, but Keith Lee then, he picks up Lee, and, it looked like he was maybe going for the hammerlock or some kind of DDT, but then Lee reverses it, hits the spirit bomb, and of course, he's not kicking out of that. 1, 2, 3. So then after that, we see a clip of the Hurt Business, and they were backstage. And they're, some like this little white guy goes to sit at their table, and they're looking at him, and they're like, who the hell is this asshole? So then they just keep eating. It was Shelton and MVP. And then Lashley comes up, and he's like, yeah, you're in my seat. So then the guy moves over, and he's like, you're still in my seat. And then he's like, oh, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And he's like, what do you, and then the guy goes to get up, and he's like, you're taking my plate. So he grabs the guy's plate, and then he leaves, and they're just all mean mugging him, staring him. And as soon as he walks away, they all start laughing. They're like, you hungry? Yeah. And then MVP starts putting that guy's food on Lashley's plate. And Lashley's like, well, I am pretty hungry. So then they're all laughing, having fun. So I like that, how they act like all mean. But then when the guy walks away, they're like, in your face. And they're all like laughing at him. So that was good. And then, they show a commercial. And then for NXT TakeOver 30 on Sunday, blah, blah, blah. This is legit. And then we see the R-Truth, beach thing with, Tozawa, you got eaten by a shark, this is awful. But then a ninja actually comes up. Now this is present on Raw. Then we see a ninja. He comes up to R-Truth. He hands him a note, and it's the same thing. He's like, if you're reading this, it means I was eaten by a shark. I'm dead, blah, blah, blah. I want you to have this. And it's Tozawa's black belt. So then R-Truth is like, he's like crying. He's all upset. You see Tozawa, he's sneaking out from underneath like a table with a tablecloth on it or something. So he rolls up, obviously R-Truth, 1, 2, 3. Charles Robinson, I believe, was the ref there. So then Akira Tozawa was like, I'm the new champ. And then the ninja who gave him the black belt that was distracting R-Truth was actually Gulak. So then Gulak knocks out Tozawa. He's the champ. And then by this point, R-Truth gets up, hits Gulak over the head with like a trash can or something, or some kind of container. And then he gets the belt back and runs away. So, does anyone care? No, but the one thing that I do like from this is we got a triple threat match for the title. And while it's like, okay, it's a useless title, whatever. Why do you like this, Jean-Paul? Well, I wish that this is just how it was defended, not through these little stupid joke segments, but through actual matches. So then we get Seth Rollins, the recap of everything that happened last week. You're not the poppy, the same angle. But the way that they're doing it now, I don't want to say like, oh, this is good shit. Like, I don't want to be Vince McMahon. This is good shit. But like, it's getting a little better and it's okay. And I think that's just because the Mysterios do such a good job selling this whole thing. Seth Rollins is really great coming into this Monday Night Messiah role. I would say he's pretty much perfected it now. He's like Bayley in her role as a heel. When it first started, people were like, ooh, I don't know. But now it's like they're doing some of their best work. So then we see Murphy, he's backstage, and Rollins is like, dude, why are you wearing your ring gear? Like, come on, this is supposed to be a good night. We got a lot of, stuff going on with the Mysterios. Come on. We got, King's Court. This is legit. Like, we got to celebrate. Murphy's all like, so, like, okay. And he's like, come on. Like, So it's kind of, again, trying to hype up, set up later on for this King's Court. And then, they're advertising the draft, which is something I'm really excited for. These divisions really need to shake up. SmackDown more than anything, but the women and tag team divisions across both shows really need a shake up. So I'm really excited for the draft, and that'll be October 9th and then October 12th. So then we get the King's Court. So then Lawler comes to the ring, and obviously he welcomes the Mysterio family. And one thing I liked about this, Lawler knows that this shit's stupid. Because he didn't try to, fanfare, draw this out. He was like, hey, let's get right to the point. Ray, you obviously had a week to think about what Seth said. You know what you said and what you said to your daughter, Aaliyah. And he's like, but, tell me what you're thinking right now. And he says that it's obvious that his kids are his. He said his family means the world to him, and that it takes an evil human being like Seth Rollins to fabricate, these lies and everything that he said. And then Dominic says, he grabs the mic from his father and he's like, next time I see Seth, I'm going to put an end to all this. And then Lawler, then he chimes in. He's like, well, hey, he's like, remember what you said about Aaliyah last week? How she's just a naive 19-year-old girl. She knows nothing of our world. And then Lawler, he's like, hey, and also, I don't know if you saw this, but, she was hanging out with Murphy. So then, Lawler asks, Aaliyah, how are you feeling? Like, let's hear her talk. So then she says she's upset about last week, but she notes that her parents have a certain image of her, but she's like, I am 19. And when you heard that, you're like, oh, okay, she's going down the bad girl path, hooking up with the bad boy, this and that. So she's like, I am 19, guys. And it's like, oh, okay, But so then she's, it shows her where she sits next to Murphy and this and that. And then she's like, oh, he's not as bad as Seth and everything. So now Seth is on the screen. And he says, like, hey, why? Let's tell the truth here. He's like, the truth is that Aaliyah might not be how she seems, because I have right here, because I don't know if you guys noticed it, but like when, he was like, oh, in those 2 segments before, when he's like, hey, Murphy, go get changed up, go get legit. Murphy got up, his phone was sitting there. So then Rollins picks up the phone and is like, okay, like, puts it in his pocket and was like, I'll check the DMs later. But he checked them all right, and they were full. So he shows on the screen the picture that Aaliyah sent, and it's like, I'll have the picture on the screen as well. But then, he's pretty much like, oh, I'm sorry about everything. I hope you're okay. She's like, oh, yeah, I am. And then he's like, if you need to talk, let me know. She's like, oh, maybe I'll take you up on that offer. Happy birthday, by the way. So then Rollins is like, oh, hey, look at this. I don't know what's going on with your daughter. And then Aaliyah, she's, she pretty much just walks away. She's like all pissed. She's like, no, I told you he's not like Seth. Gets up and walks away. So just runs away from the problems, doesn't try to convince her father or anybody. So then obviously the Mysterio family follows her. So then Murphy's backstage and he's pissed off at Seth. And Seth says he doesn't know anything. But then Seth says that, he's questioning Murphy's truth. He's like, hey, what are you being pissed at me for? And then he starts to question Murphy. But then while they're going back and forth, this is just a setup because Dominic jumps in. He starts beating them up. And then they start brawling, and then, they start pulling apart Murphy and Dominic. And this also set up a match later in the night. So this segment I like just from the Mysterio family. Like I said, they make it believable. And Dominic's intensity, he might not have it on the promo, but when the bell rings, or even just this, anytime it's like, let's get physical, he definitely has that intensity. So I really like that. So then the next segment, we got Lana and Natalya there pretty much addressing the women's tag team championships. And they say that, that it's unfair how, Shayna Baszler, Nia Jax, they weren't at the pay-per-view. We don't know when we'll see them next. There's not really any confirmed reports. Nia was trying to say Shayna's pregnant. Shayna said, no, I'm not. People said it's COVID. Nobody really knows. But, they said it's unfair that they're not here. So how about they forfeit those belts? And I forget if they said that they deserve to be champs or they deserve to have the opportunity or whatever it was, but they pretty much said that this is bullshit. So then Adam Pearce comes out. He's like, hey, you guys want a match right now? That's fine. But it's going to be against the newest members of the Raw roster. So then Mandy Rose's music hits. She comes out looking like Trish Stratus in that pink and black gear. So, that was really cool. I assume that was a callback to Trish because people have made the comparisons between the two of them for pretty much her whole main roster career. So then we also get Dana Brooke, who is, coming over from SmackDown. And this, it's like, SmackDown already doesn't have any women, but I'm not going to complain about any rosters until after the draft because the draft is coming up. So obviously that'll shake up the entire landscape, as they say. So then we got this match. This wasn't bad. Obviously, who was going to win here? You're going to have the debuting Mandy Rose, with Dana Brooke lose? No. So they won this thing. Rose, she goes off the rope. She hits a pump knee. I believe it was on Natalya. It might have been Lana. It was on. I think it was Lana. She hit it on Lana. 1, 2, 3. So unfortunately, Lana is kind of the weak link of this team. Obviously, if that, just based off wrestling skill, and also probably because her husband Miro, buries WWE every time he speaks on AEW television. But this was good for the new team. I don't know if I like this team more than Fire and Desire, but obviously Sonya Deville's not here and they had their feud. So this will be good for Dana Brooke to kind of just, ride the momentum of Mandy Rose. And maybe she will be a tag team champion. And, she's not the best wrestler, obviously, but, a lot of people say she's getting better and this and that. So, hey, as long as you keep trying, I'll never put somebody down. But if they're like Nia Jax, who clearly doesn't try, doesn't care, well, that's a different story. So then we get a replay of Alistair Black attacking Kevin Owens last week. And then we get Alistair Black. He's, we hear from him. He's in his broom closet again. And he says that Owens thrives on a system where he can manipulate, all the viewers and those around him. And then he's like, you've pretty much just manipulated everyone, to think that you're a good guy and you're a friend. But in the end, all you do is backstab people when it's most opportune for you to get ahead. He's like, did you, you say you're a family man, but do you tell your son how you backstab people? And to me, I'm thinking that's mostly like, Sami Zayn and Chris Jericho, like all those segments and stuff. Those were the real big, like memorable betrayals. And it's like, do you tell your son how you are? And then he's like, pretty much he says, but, I won't forget, all these things because everybody else forgets, but I won't. So then he takes off the bandana from his face and you see his eye, like the iris is completely black, obviously just a contact, but they sell that maybe there was some bleeding in the eye, turned it black and everything. So that's really cool. And then, we're going to get this match later on tonight. So then back from the break, we get the legends. They're still playing poker, Adaaaaa. And then we get the Street Profits come in, and it's like, oh, God. But then, of course, that was thankfully, that was the only thing we really saw from them, so it wasn't too bad. So then we get Kevin Owens versus Aleister Black. And I thought that this match was going to be similar to Andrade and Keith Lee, which maybe like, 4 or 5 minutes and done. This one a little bit longer. It was good. I appreciate that. Aleister Black, had a new look. He had pants, and his vest was a little different. Obviously, he had the iPad or the bandana over his eye, and new music. The new music is, of course, because of the CFO and everything. So obviously the old music was better just because that's kind of just what we remembered. It was his first theme. I feel like if this would have been the first theme, we probably would have been like, oh, we like this one a little more. So I don't know. I do think the other one is better overall, his original theme, but it's one of those things where we don't really have any control over it. So it is what it is. But then, so like I said, this match was good. It was long. It went longer. I like Alistair Black a lot. I don't know how Vince McMahon doesn't want to push this guy. He's a good promo. I understand he's not the tallest. He's not, the most ripped guy, but he's extremely athletic. They're pushing Dominic, maybe because he's a teen heartthrob, they're pushing him. But I'm like, how can you be like, oh, let's push Dominic to the moon and leave Alistair Black in the broom closet? But, as this thing was going on, lots of near falls, it was really good. But at the end of this, towards the end, Kevin Owens is kind of in the ropes. He's all done. And then Black is just, laying into him. And I believe it was just punches. He goes back and he elbows the ref. And so, of course, the ref sells this thing. And he's like, oh, it's done. And then the official's like, oh, he hit me, ring the bell. Kevin Owens wins. And Aleister Black is like, are you kidding me? And he's like, hey, you hit me, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, why were you right up behind me when I'm throwing punches? What do you think was going to happen when I throw my arm back to deliver a punch? He's like, you're an idiot. So then Black's getting in this guy's face, the ref. And then Kevin Owens at this point gets up, hits a stunner. And then, it's pretty much so Black loses. And then he also eats a stunner. But the only good thing to come from this is that the feud isn't over. And I'm hoping that Black goes over in the end, because they always do this with Kevin Owens. They do these weird pushes where they push him. Like, he'll beat Aleister Black. We'll probably see Dabba-Kato or something, and he'll beat him in a legit wrestling match. And he'll just beat these people that they're building, sort of. And then those people get, they get pushed down to loser Jobberville. And Kevin Owens gets built up, but then he never wins anything. He never wins a title. He never is WWE champion with a legit run. It's just he wins, and then he falls back down, and then it's the same process over and over. So I'd like to see Aleister Black come out on top of this feud, but I don't think that's going to happen. So then we get another segment with the Hurt Business. So they're backstage attacking Mustafa Ali, and then we get Ricochet, Apollo Crews. They come to his aid. They're like, oh, so it's the same thing. But at least, this inclusion of Mustafa Ali. And when we see Mustafa Ali wrestle, I'm a big fan of his, so I'll never complain about that. But, of course, that this set up a six-man tag later in the night. So then we get what everyone was looking forward to, not the open challenge. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't Drew McIntyre. It wasn't Keith Lee. It wasn't none of that. It was Drew Gulak, R-Truth, and Akira Tozawa for the 24/7 title. I mean, I appreciate it just because it was an actual match. It wasn't anything, spectacular. You're not going to go back and watch it again. But all three of these guys are excellent wrestlers. If you put them in a serious role, after something, with a serious goal at the end of it, these guys will deliver for you. And this match was actually decent for what it was. At the end of the thing, Tozawa, he comes off the top. He hits the senton on Gulak. And then pretty much R-Truth picks him up, kind of, slams him down on his face. And then he picks up Gulak, AA on Tozawa, and then pins him 1, 2, 3. So he retains his championship, of course, using the signature move of his childhood hero, John Cena. So then backstage, Charlotte Caruso, she's interviewing Rose and Brooke, and she's asking them, how do you become a team? How do you feel getting a win on your debut? And Mandy's like, oh, I've had a lot of ups and downs, probably in the bedroom with Otis. No, just kidding. She's like, throughout my whole career, had a lot of ups and downs. This is good. This is a fresh start. And, she's like, I'm with Dana, and Dana's always been here by my side supporting me, and I'm happy to be on the team with her. And then Dana pretty much put her over. She's like, oh, you come through so much adversity. I'm glad to be your partner, blah, blah, blah. They're just putting each other over. And then they just kind of stop talking, and they're like, oh. And then they look in the, like, what's going on over there? And I'm thinking it's going to be like, Bianca Belair or somebody like that, or the Riot Squad, which would have made sense because they said in their promo, oh, we know that the Riot Squad is next in line for the championships, but whoever wins that match, we're coming for you. So it should have been the Riot Squad or somebody, or even just Nia Jax or, whoever. But it was just Dominic Mysterio who's just working out. So you got even these older women checking out Dominic Mysterio. Can we live? Save some for us, Dom. But then we go into that match after commercial break. So this was good. These guys had a lot of intensity. They were just beating the hell out of each other because it's like Dominic, he's pissed off. He's like, leave my family alone. Why are you hitting on my sister? You're an asshole. And really going after him. And Murphy's like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Like, I didn't do anything. I was just being nice. I'm a decent human being, unlike Seth. But, they're really beating each other up. Some really good stuff. At the end of this thing, Dominic grabs the kendo stick. And he's like, he's going to just pretty much beat Murphy's ass. Aaliyah comes out. She's like, no, don't do this. and he's like, get out of here. Get out of here. You don't belong out here. What are you doing out here? Seth is bad people. And she's like, no, he's different than Seth, blah, blah, blah. So he, gets rolled into the ring. And then when he rolls himself, I think he goes in the ring himself. But then Murphy surprises him, obviously rolls him up, grabs the tights, 1, 2, 3. Murphy wins this thing. And then Dominic's yelling at her again. And then she pretty much just slaps him. And, she's pissed off and, just walks away. So we're going to get continuation from this. And that's why I think this is a little bit better, is because, it wasn't just like, oh, Eddie's like, oh, your son's mine. He's not your kid. Let's have this match. This is at least now the children can at least voice their opinion and, be a part of this as well. So it adds a lot more dynamic to it. And to me, the main thing is just seeing Buddy Murphy, turning face, going against Rollins. That's a match I want to see. But unfortunately, none of this, and I'm not saying that this whole basis of the feud, saying Aaliyah is not the daughter, is good television, but we're going to see some good matches from it. There's no way that you can have Rollins, Murphy, Dominic, and Ray and not have good matches, but they're not fighting for anything. They're not fighting for like a title, you're fighting for like, a fake made up storyline of, that's not your kid. This is your kid. So, I mean, that's the only thing that I really don't like from it. Of course, there's people on the internet saying Aaliyah's 19, Murphy's 31 or 32. This is so gross. People, it's an angle. Okay. If you start seeing them in public holding hands and kissing, then you can maybe be like, oh, morally, I don't like that, but she's legal. So it is what it is. Get over it. And then we see the Hurt Business after this, or they're in Action Next, excuse me. So then we get obviously a recap of everything with, the whole title picture, the U.S. title picture and everything, and what happened at Clash of Champions. But then before we get into that match, we see Dolph Ziggler. He's with Adam Pearce. He's like, hey, I know a guy for Drew's challenge tonight, And then he's like, dude, you challenge for, Drew, how many times? Like, no. Or I guess just the once. It was Kofi who he challenged a million times. But he's like, at Extreme Rules, like, dude, no, it's done. And he's like, I'm not talking about me. He's like, I'm talking about somebody else. Come on. So at this point, you already kind of knew who it was going to be. You heard the rumblings last week. Oh, Robert Roode's going to return. And, Ziggler and Roode were Corbin's lackeys in a tag team on SmackDown. So it's like, okay, it'll probably be Robert Roode if you're really thinking about it. So, I mean, that would be cool. I wish they didn't have Ziggler involved in it. And I'll get to that when we get to the main event. But then we get MVP, Shelton Benjamin, and Bobby Lashley versus Ricochet, Ali, and Apollo Crews. And this match wasn't bad. This was another one. It was pretty quick. It wasn't too long. Right when this thing started, MVP cut a promo. He's like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's Apollo Crews going against, my boy here, Bobby Lashley. There's no way you could beat him. 2 pay-per-view challenges, and you couldn't get it done. He's like, why don't you just give up? You're never going to win this title back. And Lashley goes, yeah, and it looks better on me anyway. And, he's just cutting this promo, and he's like, our boy Cedric's not here because, yeah, you did beat him last week. So now he's sent to the Hurt Business boot camp, and when he comes back, he's going to be one of the boys, blah, 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 and the lights are flashing. So then it's like, oh, what's going on? You see Retribution, they pop up, on the Thunderdome screens and everything. But they weren't in action tonight because of, I guess there was risks, or, some of them might have been exposed to COVID. So they're like, let's not risk it. So they didn't have them on. And I guess the same thing with Raw Underground. There's no real report that I saw for Raw Underground. I assume it's the same thing. A lot of those extras down there are probably people that are in the Performance Center. And they said NXT was, the place that got hit hard. So obviously the Performance Center, NXT, it's safer to have those guys off. And it's not like Raw Underground is, must-see television anyway. But this match, it was good for these guys, I guess. You got to keep the Hurt Business on TV. And they keep telling that story because now we had Ali, I believe, last time they had this match, or, similar characters in play. It was Mustafa Ali. I can't even think of the names. There's too many A's. Mustafa Ali pinned MVP. But so he pinned him again here tonight with the 450. Now, he did hit the inverted 450, I believe. Now he's just doing a normal 450, which, I mean, hey, it's pretty much the same thing, but I like the inverted a little more. I thought it gave him a little bit more, uniqueness. But, this was good. Pretty much Shelton and Lashley got taken out to the outside. And then by the other two, Ricochet and Apollo. So then that just left Ali and MVP in the ring. They were going at it. And then MVP, he ate or took, I forget what they called it, like a satellite DDT or something like that. But it didn't really hit too much. But then, like I said, Ali went up. He hit the 450 and done. So then we go back to the Legends Lounge, I guess you want to call it. So they're all there playing poker. And then, of course, they're like, oh, looking at their cards. They're like, oh, this is it. Ric Flair has all the chips. Everybody has like 1 or 2 chips. They lay their cards. Ric Flair lays his. He has a royal flush or something. They're like, that's so bullshit. And they're all pissed off. Ric Flair gets up and he does the strut. And he's like, I'm legit. So, I mean, that was cool. So then we see a vignette of Bianca Belair. And now this is what I said this last week or the week before, whenever they started doing these vignettes for her again. I said, this is what her debut should have been. Let's see these vignettes, and then they debut her. That would have been something, it's coming up on the draft. Don't be surprised if she goes to SmackDown. So this is how you build somebody new. You show these vignettes, show how good they are, how athletic, how legit they are. You debut them, but you debut them in a legit role, not where she was just with her husband and his best friend, just beating up the manager of the team they were feuding with. That's not a legit role for someone of her caliber. So pretty much as she was running sprints, she was an all-American track athlete, I believe, that they said on commentary. So, you just see her beating these people and they eventually give up because they're like, we can't outrun her. We can't beat her in a race. So then we see Retribution's promo from last week, which, I mean, they just pretty much replayed it to be like, hey, if you didn't see during that 6-man tag because you're probably sleeping or taking a shit, Retribution is still here. So they showed that, and it's like, oh, okay, whatever. But now we get Drew McIntyre. He, he's getting ready for his, open challenge. So who's it going to be? And then Ziggler's music hits when Drew's in the ring. And you even hear Drew say, he's like, I already faced you, dude. So, like, I don't know what you're doing here. And then he's like, no, I want to introduce you, my partner. And then, like, you kind of knew who it was going to be. Lights go out. You hear the piano. Glorious. And that is the one thing I will say. I'm extremely happy that his music didn't get changed. Maybe because he got called up and that was a while ago, they could do something that maybe they owned the music or they thought that music was too legit that they paid the CFO for it. But he did have his music, so it's like, thank God for that. So Robert Roode, this was a good debut or a good return, whatever you want to call it. I like this. I don't like the whole inclusion with Ziggler. Ziggler got involved in the match as well, kind of distracted Drew later on, but it didn't even, if it would have benefited and Robert Roode would have won, then it's like, oh, okay, legit. But he didn't. So to me, it's pointless. Again, not that I said, what, are you going to see Drew lose here? And then it's going to be Robert Roode going into Hell in a Cell against Randy Orton? Because clearly that would be transitional champ. But so they didn't do that. You could have did it different ways. I just don't like the pairing of Ziggler and Roode because I feel like after this, it's just going to be the two of them being paired again. And then we're just going to see, Bobby Roode and Raw Underground when that starts going again. But hopefully that's not the case. Like I said, the draft and everything's going to switch up the whole landscape. We could even see Drew McIntyre on SmackDown and Roman Reigns on Monday Night Raw. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. I don't even think WWE knows, to be honest. But this match was really good, though. Bobby Roode is, it's great to see him back, or it's glorious, I should say, to see him back. He's a hell of a wrestler, great talent. Him and Drew put on a good match. I really liked, they had the figure 4 spot, and then Drew was selling that because of the leg. He's like, oh, it's done. He flips it over. Like I said, Ziggler gets involved, and then he hits the glorious DDT. And the one thing is, obviously, he kicked out. What did we say? You're not going to put the title on Bobby Roode, especially when Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre in this, long heated feud. But with Drew having the broken jaw, I wish it would have been something where maybe he would have hit it and then Drew's like arm or leg would have bounced on the ropes when he pinned him. And then he would have been like, oh, I won. And then it's like, no, you didn't because, he was on the ropes. And then he could have been like, this is bullshit. And then Drew can hit the Claymore kick, which essentially would happen. He got up, ducked the clothesline, hits the Claymore, and done. But I would have liked to see that because he had the broken jaw. So how about you sell the DDT? But, he kicked out of 3, 4 F5s at WrestleMania. And Drew's legit, so I give him a pass. But then after this, McIntyre, he's celebrating, I'm the champ, Adaaaaa. Then we go backstage. We see this janitor. I thought, somebody was following me in my job. But you see this janitor, he's walking around. And then he goes into the Legends Lounge. And of course, it's Randy Orton, because before he goes in, he pulls a chair off his cleaning cart, and he walks in. And they're all there, Adaaaaa, and they look over, and they're like, what? And they see it's Randy Orton. He puts on his night vision little goggles, which they weren't night vision at all, because I'm pretty sure one lens was red, one was blue, so they were like 3D goggles. He turns off the lights, and he just starts wailing on these guys with a chair, beating them up. How many chair shots? Boom, boom, boom. He's probably just hitting the ground, obviously, or whatever. But, then he turns the lights back on. All the legends, done, laid out. So then he leaves. He puts his, his face covering back on, takes the goggles off, his hood back up. He walks out, and then he kind of has his back turned to everybody, and he just points to the room like, oh, it happened in there. So then all the officials, doctors, and everybody, they run in there. They're like, oh, my God, what happened? As the show goes off the air. So now, Drew's going to be pissed, because not only did Randy Orton hurt all of his friends and, I was going to say family, but none of them were really family, his close friends before this, but now he did it again. This time with a steel chair, really brutalizing all of them. So he said this is what happens when you cross the legend killer. So we're going to see this feud continue. There's only one place it can be settled: Hell in a Cell. And I think, these are going to be the two marquee matchups. You're going to see this match, Drew and Randy in Hell in a Cell, and Bayley and Sasha. If there's only going to be two out of all the WWE landscape, those are the two matches I want to see. Roman Reigns, whoever he's going against, don't care. If they're The Fiend, don't care. Rollins, Mysterio, that whole feud, don't care. Those are the two Hell in a Cell matches we need to see. But obviously, that's still a little bit away, so we'll get there when we get there. But guys, that was Monday Night Raw. Like I said, it was a better show than last week, but overall, I wouldn't say it was a great show. We did see the glorious return of Bobby Roode. That was legit. But again, he's probably going to be paired with Dolph Ziggler after this is over. So, how great is that going to be? Unless they split him up in the draft. That's why I'm not too negative on all this stuff, because the draft will really shake this up. Obviously, core storylines will probably stay together. I don't see them taking Rollins, putting him on SmackDown, keeping Murphy on Raw, putting Dominic on SmackDown, Ray on Raw. I don't see him doing any craziness like that. But, the draft definitely makes things interesting, so I'm excited for it. And, we got to just see what happens. But like always, whatever they do, Rope Break will be here to cover each and every step. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. And make sure, if you haven't, follow us on all the social medias. We have Rope Break on Facebook, the OG Rope Break on Twitter, the original Rope Break on Instagram, and, of course, right here on YouTube, the original Rope Break. And don't forget our new partnership, which we couldn't be more excited about. You can find us on alleverythingentertainment.com. They have tons of great podcasts, and we are happy to be one of them. So, guys, go on that website, bookmark it, follow us. And if you're on there and you're joining us from there onto our YouTube page, welcome. Please click subscribe. We have videos, multiple videos, pretty much a video every single day of the week. How can you not love it? Turn on the bell and you'll never miss a thing. So, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time with our coverage of the Broken Skull Sessions, Kurt Angle, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Have a nice day, guys.